Hi everybody, my name is Tara Borst and I'm going to tell you a wonderful little story about an amazing little miracle, and his name is Wyatt. Since I was little, I've always wanted kids, and when I became pregnant with Wyatt, I was ecstatic. About a month before my due date, I went in and they were concerned because I was so big and wondering if I was having twins, and he was kind of a jokester, so I wasn't sure if he was serious, but once I found out that he was serious, we went down and did an ultrasound, and they tried to find his stomach, and they couldn't. So then they sent me to Minneapolis to have a 2D ultrasound, which shows an image and it looks like he is right there. And it's very cool. You could see him sucking on his thumb, and it was just a really neat experience. So they got him to sit still long enough to take the picture, and they still couldn't find his stomach. And so they sent me to the hospital, and I was there for about 5 days. I had him a couple weeks early. And then they took him right away and did surgery to put a feeding tube in because they found out that he did have esophageal atresia, which is where the esophagus doesn't connect to the stomach. And so it only comes down about this far so that it's just past the trachea and he can still breathe and just not connected to the stomach. So it was really kind of cool because the Abbott Hospital was here and then there was an underground tunnel and it went down to the Children's Hospital, so they didn't even have to take him outside or anything. They just wheeled him right across and put him in the NICU, and he was there for a couple of weeks while he was developing enough so that he could be off the machines and everything as far as breathing goes. And so then they sent him to the intensive care unit, and he was there for 7 months. First of all, we started out with him strapped to a bed with all these tubes and sensors and bells and whistles hooked up to everything, and couldn't take him far from the bed, just long enough for the cords to reach and just enough to hold him. And after about 2 months, the amazing nurses that I had there were so supportive, and I had one in particular, her name was Nancy, and she taught me everything she knew and made it so that I could take care of him on my own, and they would just come in to take his stats and make sure I was doing everything correctly. And she would always give me advice on what the things that they were asking me to do and things like that, and she was just an absolutely amazing person. She was like Wyatt's little grandma. Since none of my family could be down here, we went through this whole thing ourselves. And so at about 2 months, I was doing well enough with him, and he was doing well enough that they could take him off his machines and just have a little suction to suction out his throat so that he wouldn't choke. And they let me take him into the hallway, and it was 5 minutes of just feeling like I had a normal child. I took him up and down the hallway in a little stroller, and it was an absolutely amazing feeling. Shortly after that, I became good enough at taking care of him that I was able to take him outside, and there was a little patch of grass outside all of that concrete, and I would lay him down on a blanket and let him touch the grass. He absolutely hated it, but it was so great to see him out in the sunlight and watching the people drive by, and it was just an amazing feeling. And at 5 months old, then they decided that his esophagus wasn't growing so that they could connect it, and so then they took him in for a surgery, and they had to do an experimental surgery. It was called the Fokker technique. It was where they took these balloons and they had one on the top of his back and one on the bottom, and then sutures that went through his back. The top one was connected to his stomach and the bottom one was connected to his esophagus. And they stretched his stomach up to his esophagus, and that took about a month that he was in a medical coma. And after that month, then they took him back into surgery and took out the contraption that they made. It was actually just a bunch of tubes and things that they had taken from other medical equipment and stuck together, and it was like a blood pressure machine. The sutures that were connected to the balloons, they would tie them on, and then they would blow it up, and then once the blood pressure would go down, then they would deflate the balloons, and then they would tie it a little bit tighter, and then that's how they stretched it. So at the 6 month mark, they connected him, and when he came out of his coma, it was an amazing feeling just to see him be able to move and to hold him and touch him again. And after he learned how to eat and hold everything down, it only took about a month, and normally it takes 3 to 4 months, so it was pretty good that he was able to pick things up so quickly. And so then we got to go home, which was, I can't even tell you how amazing that was. He's such a strong little guy, and normally when they sit in a hospital bed for that long, their development is way behind, but he kept coming up with his physical therapy, and it only took him a couple months to get back on track to where he was supposed to be. And I would take him into the hospital, and they would tell me how great he was doing and how normal he looked. And if you didn't know that he had something wrong with him, you would never know that he had esophageal atresia, because he was such a normal kid, and he's such a sweetheart. And after everything that he's been through, he has the biggest heart you've ever seen, and it's just really, truly a miracle. And thank you for your time.